whole thing rolling was the fact that he couldn't get his children's school books, he couldn't get his personal stuff out of his car, and it was a weekend, and he had to wait until Monday to get his personal stuff. Well, they shouldn't have to wait 3 or 4 days because of a weekend to get personal stuff that could have been released right there at the scene. And none of that is addressed here. And I think Larry's right. It needs to be addressed. I know that it says
if they want to come and get the state allowed items after hours, are they allowed to charge for that?
They can charge a gate fee for that. They're not charging for the property release.
What is the allowed gate fee?
Right now, we don't set pricing at all for most things as a state agency. The only thing we set pricing for is notification. So that's strictly up to your board.
What's the state average?
I think they should.
State
I
average
guarantee
usually is
25 is the max.
Well, ask them what the state average was. They'll know.
What's the state average?
State average usually runs anywhere from $35 to $45.
I think after hours, you got to give them the option of
Per
charging
release.
up to the maximum of $45 or $50.
Yeah.
Whatever you said is the maximum, so.
that's what they're going to charge.
That's correct.
Or you can wait till noon.
They've
Okay.
got to leave their house, 4 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah, I just understand that, but I also understand that people in my district, $40 an hour, that's,
They take the car.
Well, we're not talking about an hour, right? We're talking about the release, whatever it takes, not an hour.
doesn't matter. I mean, if that $50 is the difference between buying medicine.
But we're talking about requiring them to be available at a certain time
That's
of
fine.
day.
It's fine, and I want to reimburse people for their hours. I just don't want to take it out of the pocket of people who have a hard
But the
time
sheriff
paying
department
for
pays.
medicine. If you understand what I just don't want to set it too much.
Sheriff's
So
department
if we set it at 50, that's
They
what
won't
they're
let
going to charge.
They won't keep going on, see.
Well, let's not go to 50. If the average is 35 to 40, how about 40?
That's what I said, they got one bottle of whiskey. Now, I understand it's not very clean.
I mean, these aren't laws governing the people that got an accident, even if it was not their fault. These are laws governing the people that are doing harassment on service.
I'm thinking 25 is too low. I'm
That's what we
thinking
came up
50
with.
is too high. Let's go in between.
Would 35 be acceptable? 35.
Since the average is between 35 and
Okay,
40.
okay, 35
But we need to make that for the personal property
and
and/or
or.
How much is it?
35.
35.
Can I say something? I had a State Farm lady, and I told her I'd charge money to come pick her car up, and she said the minimum ought to be $50. That's what State Farm lady said, because she said she wouldn't get up there and work $50.
I understand that more, but we, on the same
And
time.
the people that fall offense is the people that don't have insurance. And they're ridiculous.
I would love to pay you $50. I would have loved to give Sheriff another bookkeeper too.
My question is,
how many county calls
do you get?
You make thousands of choices every day, but in times of emergency, it's the last thing you want to do. So enter this number in your phone right now, 501-655-2002. We got you. Driven Towing and Recovery is on your side. Available 24 hours a day. From towing, jump starts, and tire changes, no job is too big or too small when it comes to your safety and peace of mind. That's 501-655-2002. We're driven, and we got you.
Say. So, if you want to, in essence, a saving time. Okay, we worked with the Sheriff's Association last session, legislative session, because believe me, you're not the only county that has issues. Towers have got to understand that it's a privilege to be on a rotation. It's not a right. It's a privilege. So, several of our sheriffs were having issues with towers. So we got with Senator Jake Files and passed a law. It's 2750-1218. And that states that any time a law enforcement gets a complaint, they have 5 days to turn that complaint over to the state board, because the governor has positioned the board to handle complaints. And that was passed last session. So why why do y'all want to take on the ability and the problems of dealing with complaints? I know Gary used to be an investigator, so he's familiar with the process. However, for whatever reasons, back in the day, it would take 6 months, 8 months, a year and a half before a case could be heard. By law, they have 45 days. So our board today is really getting aggressive. The next problem is when you do your own complaint process. Say the sheriff has a problem with tower A, and y'all have a local board, and you deal with it. You put him out of his misery, fine him, whatever you want to do. Well, he says, okay, I'll be nice to the county, let's go to the city, let's go to the state, we'll gouge them. Y'all won't have any idea about this. If you'll have one entity that handles all complaints, such as the board, they realize when somebody's not doing right by the public in the county, in the city, in the state, in the other city, neighboring city. So by the time a tower gets 2 or 3 complaints, my gosh, they're in trouble. They can fine them up to $5,000 per offense. They can remove their license. So it makes more sense to have all the complaint process in one house, so they can keep up with who's doing what, where, you know. So anyway, we worked with that on the Sheriff's Association and got that passed.
What was the building?
That is 2750, 1218, Gary. Now that still does not prohibit y'all from doing your own thing. I mean, you can still do that if you so desire. I'm just throwing out ideas for y'all to think on. You know, I like the idea of housing all the complaints in one central area. Also, it does the sheriff, several of my constituents in the Sheriff's Association, they didn't want to be public enemy number 1 and be the bad guy kicking somebody off rotation. This makes the tow board be the bad guy.
But you can look at it this way, if they leave it stay over, they would be the bad guy.
Well, that's true, but the board finds them, the board kicks them off. It's at the sheriff's side of the equation. He doesn't have to be the bad guy. They handle the problem. Go ahead.
I have a question. How many people have y'all kicked off and suspended their license for in the last year?
That's not my part. I'll turn that over to Mr.
I can answer that for you.
How many have you suspended or revoked their license in the last year?
We have suspended 1 person the last year.
Not
So my suggestion would be to keep our board in place, because I think when it gets to them, it's gonna get swept under the carpet, and that's gonna be the end of it.
I would agree in past times, and Mr. Gastrak can tell you, in past times it would. I mean, I've seen it. We've been to the legislature many, many times, and legislators were getting called, just like the sheriff's getting calls on complaints. Complaints are not getting handled. By law, they have 45 days, and it's got to be well along the way. There is some previous, some extenuating circumstances that could extend it out a little bit, but they don't get swept under the rug anymore, sir. Give them a chance. And honestly, I heard one tower in this county that was given most of the issues. I called the state board and asked them, hey, has this tower in Garland County had any complaints? Nobody has followed the law that the governor has put in position and filed a complaint against this Garland County tower. He didn't have 0 to listen to the board. You cannot hold the board accountable if they don't know anything about your problem. Give the board an opportunity to do their job.
Now, this wouldn't apply for any kind of fees that are mandated within the county ordinance. They're not going to enforce.
No. Now, you still have the right to set your prices. You can, that is well within the sheriff's right. This is strictly the complaint process.
Well, and the complaint process could include violation of fees.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And the board, and Gary or Tracy may want to add on this. I'm going to say when it's in your county, and if there's a pricing complaint, they look at your guidelines. That's what they'll go by to handle your complaints on your behalf.
Well, you know, the section that Mr. Cochran brought up, there's wording in there that addresses what the committee or the department can do, and they can have their own committee, and they can impose sanctions, penalties, fines as they see fit. What the legislation says, though, is that during that process, the department can even finish their investigation. Let's say they find a tow operator that overcharged. The sheriff calls that tow operator and says, hey, refund them $25 or whatever, do this or do that, and rectifies the situation. If it's a formal complaint, we do ask that within 5 days or at the 5-day mark that it gets forwarded to us. It's not, trust me, as a state agency, we do not want to dictate what this community and what this sheriff is trying to do to protect the citizens locally. Not at all. But statistically, it's important for us as a state agency to track these type of things, to know what's going on in any given municipality. So that's the reason we ask to be notified on these complaints. And when the complaint does come to us, the department itself can ask, we would like for you to review this and make a determination of whether we should remove them from the list. That's new wording in, I think it's 1220 or 1219 in there also. But they don't have to. They can handle it themselves and do what they're going to do. Now, when we investigate those, if it's a formal complaint sent to us, the things we look at, we don't set pricing as a state agency. I'm sure all of you know how difficult that would be for an agency like ours to say, because what may be applicable here in Hot Springs may not be in Fayetteville or may not be in Sims where I grew up. They're different worlds. So we don't deal with legitimate pricing strictly for the sense of setting it. Our standard is reasonableness. So what we would do is if we receive that complaint, we would investigate it with a wider brush. Is this unreasonable for a regional area? Not specifically, is it outside of Garland County's policy? I don't work for Garland County, and it's not my job to enforce their ordinance. But we would look at it regionally, and we would figure out, is this thing reasonable for the region? Okay?
Yes, thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
I think that Section 3 is a very effective tool for the sheriff and his department, and I think it needs to stay there. I see no reason why their advisory committee cannot make recommendations, or if they have formal complaints that they want to forward to the state agency, they certainly have that right to do so, and I agree.
And I think that would be a good move.
But I like the idea.
It's patterned after the city of Hot Springs, and they have an advisory committee also, and they remove people from the list.
Well,
Does anybody else want
I
to
like
make a
that
comment
idea.
from the audience?
My name is Justin Hurst, and I'm here as a representative for Holcomb's Transport and Recovery. I wanted to talk about a section that we've all kind of talked about this evening that we haven't, to my knowledge, we haven't really discussed it in detail. That's Section 4, subparagraphs A and B, which is what I would consider the meat of this ordinance, which obviously deals with rates and charges. Now, we've talked about these rotations, and there's many tow truck companies here. I think I would be accurate, somewhat accurate in saying that these companies somewhat live and die by being on this rotation. We're talking about these non-consensual tows. I don't think the committee is taking into consideration here the totality of the overhead that these companies are spending and having to incur to operate these trucks that are called out. We've talked about 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning to sometimes first responders. Sometimes these guys are having to move vehicles so they get people out. But these trucks and the dollars that go in to maintain them are enormous. And looking at subparagraph A, it deals with light trucks or small trucks, and it's giving some rates that I would, I guess, encourage the committee to look at. Mr. Holcomb and I have gone through numbers and tried to crunch numbers and looking at what his overhead is and trying to get an industry average of what we can best do on looking at those overhead numbers. And the prices that this ordinance submits almost makes it hard to even break even, not just for Holcomb's Transport and Recovery, but I think for all of these tow companies. And I'll just throw out a number in here. Again, I'm basing this off of numbers we've crunched and looking at overhead expenses, but the hookup fee for these light trucks is listed here at $100. And to get would submit that a more reasonable number would be from 125 to 135. Again, taking into consideration the expense and the time, and all the things that go into these vehicles. And when you look at section 4, subparagraph B, which deals with these larger trucks, Ms. Mahoney, you know more than I do here. I mean, these trucks are $200,000-$300,000 vehicles that are pulling tremendous or doing tremendous jobs. The maintenance and upkeep on these vehicles is twice what it is on these small vehicles. But this ordinance doesn't even address a hookup fee for these larger vehicles. I mean, it's somewhat vague. If we just submit it and pass this ordinance, I think our tow truck companies are left really without even being able to charge a hookup fee for these large trucks. And I think the committee needs to look at that and consider that. We do address it in subparagraph A, but not B. But again, I just would hope and encourage that the committee could look at this and maybe even get numbers from these companies to make a good, educated, reasonable decision that would provide consistency for consumers or individuals in this bond, but also allow our tow truck companies to make a living. And I understand there's complaints here and there, and that's just in every industry, but if we're going to start setting prices for an industry, I would hope that we would not just, and I'm not saying that anybody's doing it, but pulling numbers out the air, but really sit down and look at books and look at overhead expenses and make an educated, or come to an educated conclusion. Thank you.
You make thousands of choices every day, but in times of emergency, it's the last thing you want to do. So enter this number in your phone right now, 501-655-2002. We got you. Driven Towing and Recovery is on your side. Available 24 hours a day. From towing, jump starts, and tire changes, no job is too big or too small when it comes to your safety and peace of mind. That's 501-655-2002. We're Driven, and we got you.
These rates have been set for the city for more than 15 years. And there hasn't been one record service. When I was the chief of police in the city, we had 4 record services on the list. Until I was made by the city manager, we put 5. Because that's all we need. When I retired, now they've got 14, 15 on the list. I don't see any record service begging to get off the list. They're all begging to get on the list. Chip Pike back here begged me for 2 or 3 years to get on the list. I said, Chip, I'd be more than glad to put you on the list as soon as somebody gets off. We came up with these, I called all the record services in. And I said, guys, y'all ain't had a raise in 10 years. I'm going to help you get a raise. And we're going to develop a policy. And they helped develop the policy of the city. This one used the city as a guideline, but we're letting them have, instead of $85 a tow, we're letting them have $100. Because the county is a little more spread out. We're letting them charge $2 a mile if they go up to so many miles, because the county's so spread out. If you pass this ordinance, you're not going to have one of these guys that wants to get off the list, but you're going to have a whole bunch more that wants to get on the list. And it's up to the sheriff who he wants to put on the list to take off the list.
They don't have to earn the right.
No. All they've got to do is meet the state requirements, be licensed by the board.
This coverage of the Court and Court has been brought to you by Driven Towing and Recovery.